let's play out a scenario. Imagine the year is 2026. A regional conflict suddenly boils over, and just like that, one of the world's most vital waterways slams shut. We're going to break down the incredible chain reaction that this one single event would set off across the entire planet. You might think this is just a thought experiment, but the truth is, the global economy is this incredibly complex network of connections, and some of them, well, they're a lot more fragile than we like to think. So what really happens when one of the most important ones gets severed? And this map right here gets to the absolute heart of the problem. We are talking about the Strait of Hormuz, a truly staggering 21 million barrels of oil squeezed through this choke point every single day. And look where it's all going. Almost 80% of it is headed straight to the industrial powerhouses in Asia. So this isn't some little regional issue. It is a global lifeline. Okay, so here we go. In our scenario, the strait is now closed. The effects are immediate, they are profound, and it all starts with the sheer amount of trade that has just ground to a halt. And this number really puts it all into perspective. We're not just talking about a few oil tankers here. A long-term closure would jeopardize an estimated $1.2 trillion in trade every year, and that's from just 5 of the Gulf countries that rely on this passage. That is a massive chunk of the world's economy, just frozen in place. So as you can imagine, this blockage sends an immediate shockwave rippling through the global economy. And the very first place you'd feel it is in the energy markets. Yeah, you'll see it at the gas pump for sure, but the problem goes so much deeper than that. And here is the really crucial part, summed up perfectly by Al Salazar over at Enverus. This isn't just a one-and-done price spike. Nope, the damage is cumulative. For every single month that Strait stays closed, oil prices are expected to jump another $10 to $15 a barrel. The longer the crisis goes on, the more expensive literally everything becomes. And of course, that huge price increase for oil doesn't just stay in the energy sector. It radiates out into everything else. The OECD actually had to go back and revise its global inflation forecasts, bumping them up by a full 1.2 percentage points to 4%. Why? Because the cost of shipping, of manufacturing, of producing pretty much everything we buy, it's all tied to the price of energy. But listen, that shock to energy prices, that's really only half the story. The real crisis, the one that most of us would never even see coming, is what this does to our industrial supply chains. Exactly. This goes way beyond the gas in your tank. We're talking about the fundamental building blocks of our modern world, and they are also stuck behind that choke point. Okay, so let me introduce you to naphtha. You've probably never even heard of it, but I guarantee it's in almost everything you touch. It's a byproduct of oil, a kind of raw ingredient that is absolutely essential for making a massive range of products. So what happens when the naphtha supply gets cut off? Well, the factories that make lightweight car parts, high-performance rubbers, crucial medical-grade plastics, even something as simple as a plastic bag, they all start to seize up. This is the hidden vulnerability that can bring industries to their knees. Now, check out how this actually plays out for a huge industrial economy like South Korea. They get 62% of their crude oil through the Strait, which is already a massive problem. But look at this. A whopping 75% of their vital naphtha supply comes from the Middle East. That is a dangerous double dependency that puts their entire manufacturing base in serious jeopardy. And if you think that's bad, Japan is in an even more fragile position, especially on the energy front. A jaw-dropping 95% of its oil comes from that region. And while its naphtha dependency is a bit lower at 50%, that's still a gigantic industrial risk. For countries like these, a closed strait isn't just an inconvenience. It's a full-blown existential economic threat. And of course, this whole economic crisis isn't happening in a vacuum. It's the direct result of a military conflict, one that is rapidly spilling over its original borders. Now, the initial military response is pretty effective. A joint U.S.-Israeli campaign manages to slash Iran's missile launches by over 80% in just the first week. But this is a long way from being a decisive victory. The attacks are still happening, and the threat itself is starting to change. And now we see Iran shifting its strategy. Because they're under pressure, they start focusing their attacks on their Gulf neighbors, countries like the UAE and Kuwait. The goal here is to turn up the heat on Washington's allies in the region and basically try to widen the entire conflict. So the key takeaway here is that Iran's strategy is getting smarter and broader. They're not just attacking their neighbors to put pressure on the US, they're also going after more sophisticated targets, trying to degrade what's called the sensor layer. That's the network of U.S. radars that serve as the eyes and ears for the whole region's missile defense. They're even firing missiles towards Turkey, a NATO member, trying to drag more and more players into the fight. A crisis this big doesn't just blow over and then things go back to normal. It leaves a permanent scar. And the final massive ripple effect is a long-term structural realignment of the entire global economy. And what's really fascinating here is how the damage actually scales over time. According to analyses of global shipping, a 2-week closure, the system can handle it. But once you cross that 4-week mark, the damage isn't just double, it becomes exponentially worse. Delays start cascading, piling on top of each other, and the whole network begins to break down in ways you can't even predict. And all of this forces everyone into a new reality. Countries around the world are pushed into a total reassessment of their energy security. We see a mad dash to diversify supply chains to get them away from single points of failure like the Strait of Hormuz. Suddenly, there's new investment in nuclear power, even a return to coal, all in the name of stability. Old alliances get tested, and new partnerships are born out of pure necessity. So what started as a single choke point closure didn't just make gas more expensive. It sparked a hidden industrial crisis and risked turning a regional war into a global confrontation. A conflict in one corner of the world has forced a fundamental rewiring of the entire global economic and energy system. And it really leaves us with a critical question to ponder. As we watch these old, fragile connections break, which ones are going to be the next to snap?